So early on, it appears that the offseason moves that the Panthers made in order to help Bryce Young's success is probably paying a little bit of dividends, as Bryce has had a pretty solid start to camp, and you can see the improvement day by day. I mean, it's only been a week of training camp, of course, and they've only been in pads once, but Bryce Young has some of his best work in the last few days of that first week. I mean, additions have helped, but some of the latest and probably loudest buzz that's come out of Panthers camp is someone that's been around already. And that's nobody other than Jonathan Mingo. Whether it's beat writers, analysts, radio personalities, or just firsthand accounts of fans being at practice, everybody is talking about how productive, consistent, and dependable Jonathan Mingo has been for Bryce Young as a target. And to be honest, I think it's pretty much caught everybody a little bit off guard. So in this video, we're going to talk about how Steve Smith might have been right all along about Jonathan Mingo. If you're new to the channel, what up, though? Be sure to hit the subscribe button. I do recap and analysis of the Panthers. I am here in Charlotte at Panthers training camp, attending practices, reporting, giving you news and updates like I do about everything else about this team year-round. So make sure you are subscribed and consider giving this video a thumbs up as we talk about Jonathan Mingo and how good he's looked this summer. But if you want to look good this summer, let me tell you about the sponsor of this video, Cuts Clothing. So let me put y'all again. Get ready to be the most stylish out of your whole crew this summer. I know a lot of y'all don't like to wear a lot of flashy things, but Cuts Clothing allows you to dress up and look nice while keeping it minimalistic. Cuts t-shirts are high quality, wrinkle-free, and buttery soft on your skin, man. It just feels like getting hugged by the clothing. And I really love those t-shirts because they really complement the figure I've been working on during the summer here in the gym this year. And they even got stretch to fit joggers that really look better than some slacks or khakis that you may have in your closet too. This allows you to be super comfortable and keep it plain and simple. That way, all you gotta throw on some white sneakers, some shades, maybe a necklace, a chain, or your favorite hat, and you're really good to go for date night. Go ahead and embrace that summer state of mind. For a limited time, cutsclothing.com is giving a 20% off discount to my subscribers using the code UBSportsCuts. That's going to cutsclothing.com and using the code UBSportsCuts at checkout to get 20% off. So please support the channel and tell them that I sent you, and get ready to experience the perfect blend of style and comfort with Cuts Clothing. I made a video earlier this offseason and I pretty much said that the writing may be on the raw for Jonathan Mingo and he may be in trouble. To be honest, when I made that video, a lot of the issues I brought up really had nothing to do with his performance on the field. And of course, the offseason turnover of the coaching staff and bringing in Dave Canales was a change of pace, but Dave Canales at the combine himself talked about how he really didn't have much emotional attachment to people on the roster, so he was able to evaluate from a non-biased perspective. That meaning that many times over, we see that new regimes come in and they get rid of certain players. We saw that with the moves they made, getting rid of Bradley Bozeman and a Hayden Hurst and a Von Bell this offseason, guys that had years left on their deal that were part of the prior regime, but they didn't really have any interest in keeping them around. And of course, he talked about challenging the roster. And we know that this wide receiver group that pretty much underachieved overall last year. We did lose some pieces to free agency, of course, but they also made moves this offseason to challenge that roster spot. They traded for a wide receiver one in Deontay Johnson from the Pittsburgh Steelers. They drafted a first-round wide receiver in Xavier Legette from the University of South Carolina. Of course, they retained the services of our leading receiver last year, Adam Thielen. So that started to be a crowded wide receiver room. I just was starting to get the vibes that he could turn into another Terrace Marshall Jr. Remember, Terrace Marshall Jr. was drafted out of LSU in the second round. Many thought he had first round talent outside of just him having some injuries that popped up. Of course, he was drafted by Matt Rule when Joe Brady, his former offensive coordinator, was part of the staff. Many people think that he was a Joe Brady pick in the first place. And once Joe Brady left, he kind of fell out of favor. Once Matt Rule left, he fell out of favor again and didn't play much last year as well under that regime. Now going into another regime in his fourth season, it seems like TMJ has a chance to be on the outside looking in, but of course he's had a great camp himself this year, but that's a whole nother story. Bottom line is, it seems like when you get lost and caught in the wash, sometimes you can become an afterthought, and I thought that might be the future for Jonathan Mingo. However, the early signs for training camp shows that Jonathan Mingo could be ready for a sophomore breakout season. Of course, we remember the draft content that we got, hearing David Tepper make a phone call to Steve Smith, and Steve Smith kind of letting them know that they should draft Jonathan Mingo. They took Mingo in the second round after they drafted Bryce Young first overall. Come to find out, Jonathan Mingo ended up being the first wide receiver selected in that second round on day 2 of the draft. And it was a little bit of pressure on him because some of his peers that were drafted in that same second round after him, like a Jaden Reed or a Rashee Rice or a Josh Downs, had a more productive rookie year than him. To be fair, Steve Smith did say that Jonathan Mingo was a 2 to 3 year guy that you would see that he needs to develop, and then you will get the full benefit of what he is. But you start to take a little flack when you draft a 2 to 3 year guy when you see his peers are hitting the ground running overall. But Steve Smith starting to make content now, having a podcast on the Underdog Fantasy Network. He's starting to put out content where he evaluates the wide receivers that are coming out of the draft every year. He's starting to build a reputation of a guy that can find some talent. Obviously, he's built his resume on picking Cooper Kupp as wide receiver 1 from his receiver class when nobody else was even looking at an undersized, unathletic wide receiver from Eastern Washington. We know how history has played out, and Cooper Kupp has had a very productive Super Bowl winning career thus far, making Steve Smith look like a genius. Steve Smith himself has a reputation to uphold, and word has come out, and reports have come out, not reports. He went on radio with Kyle Bailey for local radio here in Charlotte, WFNZ, and talked about how he's been working one-on-one closely with Jonathan Mingo this offseason. They've been having phone calls, having conversations, just being a resource to help him. Getting that kind of advice from a future Hall of Fame wide receiver like Steve Smith is to give to Jonathan Mingo is not going to do anything but benefit him overall. I just think it's funny and ironic that Steve Smith, look, like I said, he wants to see the Panthers do well. He wants to see Jonathan Mingo do well. But of course, he wants to ensure that, hey, I told you guys I was right about Mingo. So he's putting his hands directly on Mingo and his progress and kind of helping him along the way. And Mingo was interviewed recently himself where he said that just another year in the NFL getting experience has just been super helpful for him. Last year, I told you guys, he was kind of put into a bad position. For a guy that was a developmental wide receiver, he was counted on to be uber productive after we got rid of DJ Moore. With DJ Moore leaving, we needed somebody to step up. With only Adam Thielen being the experienced guy that can put up production, Jonathan Mingo probably wasn't ready for wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 slot right away, was forced into that position. And I think it's partially why he's fallen out of favor with a lot of fans. So in hindsight, it's really not his fault because he was drafted for a position and responsibility that he clearly wasn't ready for. No fault of his own. Mingo also said in his interview that he worked out with Bryce Young this summer in California to throw around. Last year, when they had that workout in Dallas with the team and Bryce Young and all the receivers, Jonathan Mingo was not present. Jonathan Mingo worked out with his own wide receiver coach on the side, so there might have been some chemistry that was missed. You can actually see in practice now and from the start in training camp that Mingo and Bryce have way, way better chemistry and they're on the same page a lot because Bryce Young has been scrambling a lot in practice and he's been finding Jonathan Mingo on the scramble drill a lot in practice as well. And to do that, you have to be on the same page to know what a guy is thinking when, because when you have those scramble drill plays, those aren't drawn up. You gotta have to create on the go. And so for them to be on one accord there, lets you know that that chemistry they built is paying off. And this was the ideal scenario when they drafted a receiver and a quarterback back to back. You want your young guys to grow together and progress in the league as time goes by. That way you have that tandem, that 1-2 punch that you want for the future. But as of now, thanks to his high start, Mingo is probably going to be slotted as the number 2 or number 3 wide receiver along with Deontay Johnson and Adam Thielen. And even though the Panthers spent a first round draft pick on the wide receiver, Mingo has clearly outperformed Xavier Legette thus far through camp because Legette, he's going to have a role. It may not be as specific right away, but they're going to give him the ball in certain ways and let him do things after the catch. He has some development to do as a pure wide receiver that will bring him along slow and get him in when he's ready. Right now, Mingo is further along than him. But this is what Dave Canales meant when he said challenge the roster. Bringing in a Deontay Johnson and a Xavier Legette has applied pressure to the whole group. Now, what does pressure do? Pressure can either make diamonds or they can make pipe burst. You're either going to shine or you're either going to crumble under it. And Jonathan Mingo has decided to elevate his game. He's gotten better, but he's clearly elevating his game in training camp and rising to the occasion. I still expect Deontay Johnson and Adam Thielen to be the leading guys of this group because they've had a great camp thus far as well. But as the year goes on, if Mingo stays on this track, I'm all for Jonathan Mingo supplanting a Adam Thielen down the line because Adam Thielen's getting up there in age and Mingo is the future. So being able to carve out that role as that wide receiver too, and maybe Quentin Thielen as just a chain mover when we need him to come up clutch, is an ideal scenario, will be just what the doctor ordered. So the Panthers may not have just a dominant wide receiver one out of this group, but I think something is to be said about a wide receiver by committee. And that is a good problem to have when you have a first-round draft pick, a guy you traded for, your second-round draft pick stepping up, and of course, a dependable 1,000-yard receiver that you have, all being able to bring things to the table. I'd like to look at the Green Bay Packers. They don't really have a dominant number one either. They have a myriad of weapons that they spent second-round, mid-round picks on and surrounded their young quarterback with. You got a Christian Watson who's a speed guy. You got a Jaden Reed guy who's a great route runner that plays the slot and can be that gadget guy. You got an Octavian Wicks, a phenomenal route runner, and a Romeo Doubs who was a good all-around wide receiver in general. Just a variety of skill sets to bring to the table that the defense really can't key on guy. There may not be one guy that breaks down the defense or commands super attention, but the fact that they have a coach and a quarterback that can spread the ball around and put guys in position to succeed, it keeps the defense off balance. But to be fair and play devil's advocate, it has only been about a week of training camp that Jonathan Mingo has come off with this great start of camp. Time and time again in this Panthers franchise history, we've seen guys have great training camps just to turn around and do nothing and carry it over to the end. There's always a training camp MVP every season, and it really doesn't materialize. I go back to 2018 or 2019 or so, thinking about Curtis Samuel, a young Curtis Samuel who had a phenomenal, almost dominant training camp with Cam Newton, and it just seemed like everything was in front of him. Curtis Samuel ended up materializing later on down the line, but that year, he didn't really do much. He ended up getting hurt and just wasn't the guy that we expected him to be after the way he started in training camp. I remember Davion Nixon, a defensive tackle that we drafted, ended up having a pretty good camp, had a pick six as a defensive tackle, didn't play much at all during the year at all. Terrace Marshall Jr. himself, in the first or second year, he had great training camps. We still haven't seen that materialize during the regular season as well. And just last year, DJ Chark, in that first week, guys, I swore he was going to be that wide receiver one. He was catching deep passes with Bryce Young. He was catching out routes, drag routes, everything that we needed from DJ Chark. He was giving us during training camp, but he sizzled off and it really didn't carry over to the regular season either. So I think we just need to pump the brakes overall on what we expect from Jonathan Mingo, but the progress is hard to deny. It's hard to not get excited about it because this is exactly what we need to see, and I'd rather have it now than not have anything from Mingo. At least get us excited about it and see that you're progressing rather than not doing anything. But I want to see it carry over the rest of training camp. I want to see it carry over through joint practices. I want to see it carry over to preseason. I want to see it carry over through the regular season. And then we can figure out where we go from there in terms of just everything overall. But the early signs, it's hard not to get excited about it. And I'm super, super happy about this. Like I said, I might have rolled him off myself, but this is just what the doctor ordered to see him exceed my expectations and everybody else's expectations and become that wide receiver that they hoped that he would be when they drafted him. But you guys let me know down below in the comments how you feel about Jonathan Mingo having a pretty hot start to training camp. Are you kind of playing wait and see? Are you super excited about his progress and you think that he should be wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 3, whatever he may be? Let me know how you feel down below in the comments. Let's talk about it and chop it up. But I really appreciate you guys watching. Make sure you hit that subscribe button down below for more training camp videos. I appreciate you watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.